What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing whether or not Bigfoot is in fact a paranormal entity. So I know I promised you guys that we would be discussing a family that lived with Bigfoot this week, and when I first came across the information, I was super excited to bring it to you guys. However, as I went through the research and all of the articles, I realized I had already done a video on this same family and about how she and her family, so this woman and basically her daughter, cohabitated with several Bigfoot creatures, which was possibly a family of Bigfoot creatures. I had such high hopes that it would be another family or possibly several who had come forward recently with their own stories of it having happened to them as well. But as of right now, there's only that one woman I could find who makes these claims and who is believable enough, that's the key, that the information is out there enough that I could do a whole video about it. So not to worry, I'll put the link for that video that I've already done on that subject in the description box below. I was obviously still thinking about Bigfoot when trying to come up with what to cover this week instead, and since what I had been planning all week wasn't a viable option anymore, I got to thinking about the mere existence of it. I mean, we've discussed here the fact that Bigfoot is more than likely some sort of interdimensional. We've had conversations about their possible connection to extraterrestrial beings and even if they're related somehow to the Fae, but we haven't ever specifically discussed the paranormal element. I think I'm just remiss in my duties of bringing a well-rounded bunch of information to you all if I'm not discussing all of the possible angles and options as to what Bigfoot could be. There are so many people out there, guys, who refuse to even remotely entertain the fact that Bigfoot is so much more than some as yet unnamed animal we humans simply haven't been able to get a hold of and or classify yet. It's not just some unnamed animal running around the woods. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, through many of the encounters I've read and received, and through all of the work that I do on a daily basis that not too many people out there know about, where I have to sift through encounter after encounter, and yes, that is part of my real job or day job, which I do in order to make a paycheck, Bigfoot has several paranormal and supernatural elements to it, and to a lot of the encounters that cross my desk or that are in my inbox every single day. I take no issue with people who want to keep on believing that these elements aren't there and that it's all a bid for the paranormal community to involve and enmesh ourselves in with something that's a bit more accepting than what we would normally come to the table with, that being Bigfoot. However, I have found every single time that those same people are refusing to actually bring real research, facts, and evidence to back up their theories and opinions, and even their complete and total disregard for those same possibilities. That, my friends, I take great issue with and outright reject. I think that's probably because those people do the research, and once they do, they can't back up what they're saying at all. So once they actually research this, once they put the time and effort and the work into it and figure out that there is something supernatural and or paranormal going on here, they're like, you know what? I've already made such a big deal about that not being the case that I'm just going to pretend like I didn't come across this. That's just my opinion, obviously. I know this as someone, as I've already stated, who has to look into the validity of Bigfoot encounters, as well as many other cryptid, extraterrestrial, and paranormal entity encounters across the board, who has never once been able to prove or disprove one way or the other whether or not this creature is somehow supernatural. In fact, too, many researchers refuse to even acknowledge that there could be an element of truth to these wilder theories, and who also refuse to even look into cases that do not fit their own personal narratives. They have their minds already made up that it's a regular animal or creature and completely and totally cryptozoological. That, to me, gives them some serious credibility issues themselves. How can someone's mind be made up, for better or for worse, when it comes to a creature or entity that there's never in the history of time, as far as we're aware of anyway, that's never left behind a corpse to examine or a living specimen on which to, at the very least, observe? Biased thinking and closed minds do not belong in this community and can actually have a devastating effect on the community as a whole, and that I have a major issue with. With all of that being said, let me let you make up your own minds after hearing what I have to say, and I hope listening with an interested and open mind yourselves. Let's jump right in. Let's start with a guest who is on a show I know I'll be on one day because I just absolutely love it, and it would be a literal dream come true. Coast to Coast AM, which is and was at this particular time hosted by one of the most awesomest human beings on the planet, in my humble opinion, Mr. Sir George Noory. The guest on the night of November 24th, 2014 was author and Sasquatch expert Stan Gordon, and he was speaking about his Bigfoot research and all of the writing he's done on that particular subject. According to his immense research, there is a connection between Bigfoot and other similar creatures and lots of other weird and strange phenomena, such as, just to name a couple here, UFOs and those of a psychic nature. Stan Gordon talked about Bigfoot's uncanny and unnatural ability to ever be shot, despite being shot at over and over again, and with a plethora of different types of weapons throughout the ages. I am going to summarize his interview here for you all now. This is what was on Coast to Coast website the next day after Gordon appeared as a guest to discuss the matter at hand. Quote, Gordon explained that in October of 1973, witnesses spotted a slow-moving, bright red UFO apparently land in the pasture of a farm. Suddenly, they noticed two Bigfoot creeping along a barbed wire fence about 75 feet away from the UFO and making those strange sounds. One of the men then tried shooting the Bigfoot with live ammunition, but the bullets had no effect, and the creatures wandered off into the woods, end quote. This didn't only happen that one time, guys, and in fact, it happens more than the general public or average person in this community is even aware of. Bigfoot investigator Philip Reif said, quote, in 1959, a policeman had a scary encounter with a Bigfoot on a rural road in Carroll County. The officer watched in amazement as the creature crossed directly in front of his patrol car and stepped effortlessly over a barbed wire fence. The policeman then withdrew his service revolver and fired at the Bigfoot. When the bullets appeared to have had no effect, the officer sprinted to his car and sped from the scene, end quote. Moving on, a perfect example of this has been recorded by Jack Lasperitis, author of the book The Psychic Sasquatch. I remember that last name because I remember choking all over it trying to say it last time too. He tells of a story of a group of people that had an amazing encounter with a Bigfoot. The story came from a Mrs. Jeffrey, whose story Lasperitis summarizes as follows, quote, after returning from a long hike, the group was stunned when a 9 to 10 foot Sasquatch stepped out in front of them a short distance away. Then, in the twinkling of an eye, the Bigfoot completely disappeared in front of the witnesses. The witnesses insisted that it literally dematerialized. Mrs. Jeffrey reported that she was so awed at what she saw that when they returned home, she did not leave the house for 2 weeks. The woman was in such a total state of shock that she did not return to the area for some time, end quote. Now, we have discussed this particular encounter before, and it always fascinates me because some witnesses are just a little bit more credible, at least to me and in my opinion. Someone like Mrs. Jeffrey, a kindly little old woman who seems to have no self-serving interest in and in fact seems to want no part of gaining fame from her experience, is more credible than, for example, someone inside of the community already that is looking for the perfect piece of evidence to bring out into the world. I'm not saying by any means, not at all, that someone who hunts Bigfoot isn't credible though, and I hope you all understand what I'm saying there and the distinction I'm trying to make. I also feel like she most likely didn't even know or believe that Bigfoot even existed and therefore would have been reluctant to speak out about something like that, which could have caused her any number of problems in her life, both personally and possibly professionally. So the fact that she suddenly came up with this, in my opinion, lends more credence to it, more than likely being true and something that actually happened to her. She risked major ridicule, backlash, and all of those other things we in this community have experienced our whole lives, and I just don't see why any person would ever do that for no reason and with nothing at all to gain from it except to be honest about her own personal experiences. Author Ronald Coughlin was also quoted as speaking on the subject when he said, quote, quite a large number of Bigfoot-type creatures have been seen in the vicinity of UFOs. I'm not saying there's necessarily a connection between the two, but they do quite often turn up in the same areas. Now, if UFOs travel by wormholes and if Bigfoot does the same, that might allow for a connection between the two. They might not be mutually exclusive. If there are any of these wormholes on Earth, it would be quite easy for anything to come through, and it's quite possibly any number of anomalous creatures could find their way through from time to time. You remember John Keel and his window areas. That would tend to indicate there's a wormhole in the vicinity, such as Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman was seen. I have the distinct suspicion we are dealing with window areas that either contact some other planet or they contact another universe. My money is on the other universe rather than the other planet, to be honest with you. Either a shortcut through time or a shortcut through space is recognized as possible these days. This is kind of cutting edge physics, as it were. Now, the other one isn't cutting edge physics at all. It's my own little theory. I think looking at a great many legends, folktales, and things of that nature, it is possible to vibrate at different rates. And if you vibrate at a different rate, you are not seen, you are not tangible. And then when your vibration changes, you are seen and you are tangible. Maybe that has something to do with Bigfoot appearing and disappearing in such a strange fashion, end quote. There's a lot to unpack there, but one of the first things he said that really caught my attention was when he was talking about how any number of strange creatures could be traveling through the wormholes that extraterrestrials are suspected of traveling through. Okay? Now, in the past 20 years or so, mainly since camera phones and like our overly surveilled societies have really just begun to be something that's pretty normal or like kind of expected, we have been seeing terrifying creatures more often, right? In the woods, at least. I would say, yeah, someone who writes about that stuff for a living, we definitely have. Glimmerman, the Rake, the Pale Crawlers, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Skunk Ape, the list goes on and on and on. And maybe even entities that we consider demonic. Reptilians. I was going to say reptiles. Reptilians, too. So the wormhole theory really does make a lot of sense to me. And I feel like they would be in areas like in the woods. That's where they would come and go from, because it's a lot more likely someone's going to find a wormhole to travel through in the woods than like at your local Burger King or whatever, right? And wormholes, I don't know exactly what their specific definition is, but I'm just thinking of portals here. Maybe wormholes are what create the portals that a lot of people in this community and outside of it have been seeing a lot more of in the last 2 decades. Guys, you have no idea, or maybe some of you do, how right he is when he said what he did about being tangible or not based on how you're vibrating. You know, I'm going to cover this in my upcoming series about the Galactic Federation and all of the beings associated with it in depth. But one of the things we all need to understand is that when an entity, let's take reptilians for example here, are referred to as shapeshifters, that doesn't mean they literally change what they are and shift into something else. And if I'm right about that, that's the same thing for werewolves and any other shapeshifters. So it's not like when we're watching a horror movie and the man twists and all of his bones break and he's like in turmoil and pain and he's turning into a werewolf, right? I always said to you guys, like, I don't get how that could even be possible, because your body would have to go back into its original state. That is not what's happening. There's not an actual physical shift of these creatures and entities. They merely either trick human beings by using vibrational movements, auditory frequencies that we have no idea we are subconsciously picking up, a combination of both, and probably so many other things in order to merely present an image to humans, to trick our eyes into seeing what isn't actually there or something other than what we are seeing. And that's what he is trying to bring up by mentioning the vibrational frequencies that make certain entities and beings here on planet Earth seem to be moving through portals or disappearing right before our very eyes. In fact, I have also been coming across more and more recently, and this is, I can't wait to get enough to do a video on it, people who swear they saw Bigfoot and that the creature disappeared right in front of them, but they knew that it was still there, right there in front of them, only now they couldn't see it. Example. a lot of people, and I'm not backing this conspiracy, guys, I'm just using it as an example. A lot of people will say, you know, the president of the United States is really reptilian. So when he speaks to us, if that were the case, to anyone, like to other reptilians or anyone who can see through these things or block out the auditory, whatever it may be that they're using, he still looks like a reptilian. It's just they're putting out these frequencies and these signals to our very weak, compared to them, let's be real, human brains to trick our human eyes into seeing what we're looking at, which is a fairly normal looking human being. I personally think Joe Biden looks like the Crypt Keeper, Donald Trump an Oompa Loompa. I mean, guys, I can be really mean when I want to be, but I'm only saying it in jest, you know, as a joke. So that brings me right into the next portion of this paranormal Bigfoot discussion, and that would be the discussion of infrasound. So infrasound is anything below 20 hertz, which makes it undetectable to the human ear. There are many different animals that use infrasound in order to communicate with one another, but human beings definitely aren't one of those species because we absolutely cannot hear it. Now, that isn't to say that people with certain abilities can't hear it at all, or that they can't hear it maybe sometimes, but the fact of the matter is that most of the population, abilities or not, cannot hear these frequencies. So this sort of communication can be very effective for up to a number of miles. The main thing I want to discuss here with you all today regarding infrasound is the fact that when it's directed right at human beings, it can have a wide variety and startling array of other adverse and negative side effects on us as well. The sensations aren't only physical either and can be psychological and can cause both auditory and visual hallucinations. A lot of the times, this is what causes us to perhaps view things or perceive something through a supernatural lens, as it's called. And sometimes what's actually happening has nothing to do with the paranormal or anything supernatural after all. I mean, giraffes use this, elephants use this. I think there are some ocean mammals as well, like dolphins and whales, but don't quote me on those last two. So what the hell am I talking about here? What are you talking about, Gemma? Well, I'm glad you asked. There are more than a few reports that I've personally come across and that are otherwise just floating around out there of people who have been in close proximity to Bigfoot and who have reported being a witness to one or more, who have also reported at the same time feeling inexplicable terror overtake them and or feeling dizzy, lightheaded, nauseous, confused, disoriented, and sometimes even physically unable to move at all. A lot of the time, we as human beings chalk that last part up to being shocked still, right? I was so scared I couldn't move. Well, yeah, but that isn't the case in every single instance. And in fact, it's more likely to be, as far as the research is concerned, due to the infrasound that Bigfoot uses to communicate with one another and how it affects us. Also, I'm talking about when all of those things start to happen to us, as well as in extreme cases, hyperventilation, before they even spot the entity or creature in question and before they're even consciously aware of it. So this all could be happening, the feelings of disorientation, the confusion that a lot of people who get lost in the woods report feeling before they're found 5 days later, and they're like, I don't know what happened. I was just walking back to camp and I suddenly was confused, or suddenly very dizzy, suddenly very nauseous, right? Disoriented. We hear it all the time, especially with the missing phenomenon. So not only could that be the Bigfoot using infrasound in order to communicate with one another, but it's highly probable that something is aiming it directly at the human being who's in a position to be a witness to the creature or entity itself, because Bigfoot is not the only entity out there that uses infrasound. I'm positive of that, and I don't really know how to prove it. It's just, I guess it's just a gut feeling, so it is what it is, right? A Sasquatch expert named Scott Carpenter talked about this when he discussed his own personal encounter with Bigfoot. He said, quote, I am not an acoustic expert or a scientist. My findings are based on observation and common sense. Imagine that. I think that I was under the influence of infrasound during my encounter with the Bigfoot on April 30th, 2010. The Bigfoot manipulated my perception and sanitized my memory, end quote. Someone who calls themselves Miss Sasquatcher said she saw Bigfoot in Alberta Falls, Canada, and dealt with something very similar. It was June of 2013 when she had her experience, and she said, quote, "I felt as if my chest was heavy, my breathing was shallow, and I could hardly catch my breath. Was there a Bigfoot nearby producing infrasonic waves to scare the heck out of us? We'll never know that for sure, but I can say with certainty that something out there made me feel more fear and panic than I have ever felt before." End quote. So as most of you already know, if you know anything about me, that is, there is no way in hell I am suggesting that infrasound is the end-all and be-all of the reasons people have paranormal or supernatural experiences. I mean, obviously, I'm a medium. But I will say that it seems a lot of the encounters and things that we label as high strangeness in general in this community could be the result of it sometimes. Guys, I could talk myself into a loop here if I have to continuously reiterate for those in the back or who can't hear well that it isn't at all the only thing that could be going on here. And there are, in fact, more paranormal and supernatural encounters that actually happen and that aren't a result of infrasound. But when it comes to Bigfoot encounters, which is what this video is about and why some people are adamant that it is a paranormal or supernatural creature, I'm just saying that this could be the most likely case of what's actually happening, the infrasound, if that makes sense. If we want to ever actually connect the pieces or put all of the jigsaw together, we have to stop being so divisive within this community. There are people who absolutely refuse to believe Bigfoot is anything other than some unclassified ape. That extraterrestrials are the result of overactive imaginations and watching too much bad television, and that the paranormal is for nutjobs and wackos who can't distinguish fantasy and reality. And none of that is very inclusive, open-minded, or comes close to even being the truth. Now, because all of this research is fairly new and somewhat limited, I mean, as I previously stated, there are so many people who just dismiss Bigfoot as being anything out of the ordinary altogether, let alone talk about the possibility of that same creature being anything such as paranormal or supernatural. That's where I ran out of data for this video. But I won't leave you all hanging and wanted to discuss one more element to this phenomenon that I think is really very important. I think it's important not only because it's something I believe very much is happening myself, but because I know so many credible witnesses who have come forward and reported having this happen to them with Bigfoot, and yet I almost never hear anyone talking about it at all. Can and does Bigfoot telepathically communicate? Let's see what you all believe after hearing what I've got for you on that for this portion of this video. A couple in their 30s who were originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, named Donnie and Lynn, had quite the experience while out exploring together, and it was anything but fascinating as far as what they ended up having to deal with encountering, as far as they're concerned, right? Because I think it's pretty damn fascinating. But let me start at the beginning. The two of them were living together on the outskirts of Oklahoma City when they were interviewed about the subject, and I included everything they had to say about what happened to them. Donnie said that on March 8th, 2007, it was his and Lynn's second wedding anniversary, and because they both loved nature and the outdoors so much, a regular and very crowded resort just wouldn't do for them to be able to celebrate it. They instead decided to spend 9 days deep in the wilderness of the Ouachita National Forest. I looked up how to pronounce that, so sorry if I got it wrong. They would definitely come to regret that decision later on. Let's just get into it. So, the Ouachita National Forest is the oldest forest in the southern United States and covers the western section of Arkansas and parts of eastern Oklahoma. It contains almost 2 million acres and is said to be very scenic, with the name coming from the French spelling of an old native word, Ouachita, which means, quote, good hunting grounds, end quote. The day before their vacation was to come to an end, at around 5 p.m., they were walking along the Ouachita National Recreation Trail when Donnie suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere had an overwhelming sensation that he and Lynn were being intensely watched. Let's just say he wasn't wrong either. The two were holding hands as they strolled leisurely along the trail when suddenly and again, as though out of nowhere, a gigantic, hairy, unknown creature came crashing through the trees, ending up no more than 20 feet from where they had just stopped dead in their tracks as they heard it coming. So they're walking along, minding their own business, and a giant ape-looking thing comes barreling through the trees right towards them and stops 20 feet in front of them. So these two didn't know any more than the average person who isn't involved or enmeshed in this community did about cryptids or cryptozoology, but as is often the case, they did recognize the creature right away for what it was. A Bigfoot. Donnie reported that the Bigfoot was about 8.5 feet tall and immensely huge. He said it was, quote, obviously male, end quote, with very bulky legs and arms. Its head was cone-shaped and it also had a, quote, massive chest, end quote. According to Donnie as well, it was covered in, quote, dark brown hair that had a lot of white in it, which made us think that it was really old, end quote. Lynn said that she was just too shocked to even move and that she fell immediately to her knees as she and Donnie just stared at the creature while it stared straight back at them. As she and her husband continued in this sort of standoff/staring contest with the Sasquatch creature, their heads were suddenly filled with the sound of a very gentle, female, very feminine voice that told them, quote, do not be afraid. You will not be harmed. Do not come closer, end quote. Donnie said, quote, it was like we were thinking the words but listening to them, if that makes sense, end quote. This was very validating to me, guys, because time and time again, when I mention I have accidentally channeled a Bigfoot one time, not only do most people not even believe doing something like that is possible, but if they do initially believe me, then I never fail to lose most of them when I say that the voice was female. Bigfoot creatures looked like they could tear apart a house, limb from limb, so to speak, with their bare hands, so I get it. But when I read through this interview, I was very pleased to see it wasn't only me who has had such a confusing experience with Bigfoot. Unfortunately for these two, they had to actually be with one instead of just seeing it in their mind's eye, which is what happened to me. Believe it or not, this wasn't the strangest thing that would happen to them either. Donnie tried to pull himself together at least a little bit, while Lynn continued to shake to the point she couldn't stand and continued kneeling on the ground with her arms latched onto her husband's legs for support and comfort. Donnie initially thought that he should take a photo of the creature, and he immediately moved to grab his digital camera from his backpack, right? I think it's 2007, 2008, they said. However, that wasn't going to happen because as he did that, the voice, which was still soft and gentle but had taken on a somewhat of a stern tone, said, quote, do not, end quote. He tried to ignore what he heard because he really wanted the photo and knew what it would mean to have one, whether it be for him to share or just to keep for himself as proof for when his mind inevitably tried to talk him out of the whole situation as though it never happened or somehow had been misconstrued for something it wasn't, like us human beings tend to do. Like, you know, maybe it was a large squirrel, you know. The human mind will say and convince itself of anything to convince us that we haven't been traumatized. That's a fact. So Donnie kept digging around for his camera. The voice said, quote, no, do not. No, do not, end quote, as the creature's face shifted from one of a blank stare to a much more malevolent frown. It said one more time, quote, do not, end quote, all the while still in a very cool, calm, and very much collected female voice, even as it was becoming more threatening in visage and stance as it telepathically uttered the words to him. The whole while the Bigfoot was inching closer and closer to them, and it was only about 10 feet from them at that point. I think this is where Donnie finally looked up and saw the creature's face and that it had turned into something quite scary and threatening because he finally stopped looking for the camera and fell to his knees to comfort and hold on to his wife. Smart man. He knew exactly when to quit, when it was almost too late. The creature then stopped moving closer and gave them one more message as it stood there over them. Quote, you will not be hurt and you need not fear. Go. One more time, I shall see you, end quote. The couple needed nothing more and certainly didn't need to be encouraged to get up and get the hell out of there, so that's exactly what they did. They both had a very hard time even standing up because they were shaking so badly, but they did manage to get out of there rather quickly anyway. They kept looking back to see if they were being followed, and they didn't stop until they could no longer see the entity behind them. They weren't being followed, but they just kept looking to make sure like it was going the other way. I don't know when the next time the Bigfoot and the couple met, but it did say they would meet one more time, so I honestly would love to know what that was all about, but unfortunately I did look. As usual, there was no additional information. So I don't know much else after their path turned to the left and they could no longer see it. I do know that telepathic communication is something decidedly paranormal, but it's also generally supernatural and definitely extraterrestrial. So how do I chalk Bigfoot up, right? Is it paranormal or is it not? I honestly don't know, but I do know with absolute certainty based on my research and my own channeled encounter with one that they are very much spiritual beings, even for as aggressive as they seem to be sometimes. There isn't a single species we know of for sure that has every single one of the species behaving in the same ways, and in the rare case that someone is attacked by Bigfoot, I often wonder what they might have done inadvertently or otherwise to provoke it. Or could it be just a few bad apples rotting the whole bunch, as they say? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, please, as always. So I've also had experiences with shadow beings, both personally and through my profession outside of YouTube and the work I do, that it happens more than people are willing to admit. And I think that's a huge part of the problem, meaning shadow beings being telepathic and telepathically communicating. People are just afraid to admit it for fear of ridicule, or perhaps that they're going crazy or something because shadow people don't speak. Well, sometimes they do. I mean, they do. They do it telepathically, and I feel it's a very dangerous, slippery slope to say that any paranormal, supernatural, or extraterrestrial entities, any unknown creature, absolutely does not do something, absolutely will not, cannot, won't. We just don't know enough about them. We don't even know what Bigfoot is or where it comes from. So how can we say it can't telepathically communicate? Just because our idea of a primate, we tend to think of Bigfoot as cryptozoological, which he or it very well could be. But we don't know that for sure. If it's telepathically communicating, and I believe that it is, 100% without a doubt, in my opinion, it definitely is, then it can't be just a regular primate or cryptozoological animal creature. It can't be. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but as always, if you disagree with me, if you have information contrary to what I've said or presented here, or if you know something that I didn't put here or that I don't, let me know the information. If you're going to disagree, let me know why. If you're going to tell me I got something wrong or that I'm wrong personally about something, tell me why. Another issue I see all the time is that witnesses are spoken to by a number of different entities, paranormal and otherwise, like Bigfoot or shadow beings, but they have no idea that that's what's actually happening, because a lot of the time there's thoughts or ideas being filtered into their brain, and it's hard for your average everyday person to understand that the thoughts are merely implants and not what their own brains have come up with. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you enjoyed hanging out with each other in the premiere. Spread the love, please, by sharing this video, and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure your notification bell is turned on, and if you think you're already subscribed, go back and check, because YouTube has been being a little dickish lately. I'm just saying. Please check out the description box. You will find a link to jivecreations.com for Gemma Jade merchandise, okay? Shirts, cups, gym bags, puzzles, bumper stickers, vanity license plates. I mean, guys, it runs the gamut what we have on there, and it's just all so cool. Keychains, bookmarks, all that kind of stuff. Check it out, jivecreations.com, link in the description box. Also, links for all of my books on Amazon, the Kindle and paperback versions, Missing the Faith Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond. Also, if you'd like to make a donation to the channel, that is how I get paid. That's how I buy equipment, things like that. Keep StreamYard going for the live streams, etc., ad nauseum. The links for my PayPal, my Cash App are in the description box, and the one for my Amazon wish list gift link where you can send me crystals, decks. I mean, it runs the gamut what's on there. Every Wednesday night, starting at between 7 and 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time, you will find myself and Ghost Dragon CW right here on this channel doing live Intuitive Oracle. What is that? What's Intuitive Oracle? What's Oracle? What does Intuitive mean? Come on in and find out. Get a random card pulled from a random deck by your own spirit team. I will channel the message through and tell you what your next week or two is going to be like. On any given Thursday, you can find either myself, Ghost Dragon CW, and Miss Paranormal Pixie Lara, or just Miss Lara with the Paranormal Pixie Hour. We'll either be doing Chillax and Chat, all three of us together, Conversations with Lara, the Paranormal Pixie Hour at 8 p.m. Eastern Time and going until we go. Friday nights at midnight, Saturday nights at midnight, Midnight Vibes, Conversations with a Ghost Dragon. That is Sir Ghost Dragon ZW stream. It's always a good time in there. I have gotten so much positive feedback from everybody about not only Ghost Dragon stream on Friday and Saturday nights, but Miss Lara stream as well. So you guys are digging the content. You're loving the live streams. Every other Monday, so not the Monday you're watching this video, but the following Monday. And I always remind you in the pre-recorded, which always premieres at 11 a.m. Eastern Monday, it'll be afternoon talk, myself and Ghost Dragon ZW at noon. This particular week, the week that you're watching this, if you're watching it when it first comes out on July 24th, 2023, Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern, on Tuesday, the 25th, I will be appearing on Paranormal Highway with Eric over there. And that will be at noon Eastern Time. We're just going to talk about the paranormal. We're going to talk about mediumship. We're going to talk probably about shadow entities because they always seem to come up. We're going to talk about a lot of things and stuff. Go on over and check it out. And even if you don't catch it live, head on over to Paranormal Highway and check that out. I'm also hoping to be doing something, being on Long Island Bigfoot's channel soon, back with Wayne and Michelle on Michigan UFO Paranormal Portal podcast. So a lot of big things. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. Enforce your boundaries. If nobody told you today, I believe in you. You are perfect. You are beautiful. You are just the way you were meant to be created. Don't ever let anyone tell you you can't do something, make you feel less than, make you question your own reality, confuse you. You are a badass. You know how I know that? Because you're in here hanging around with these guys in the premiere, or because you're watching my channel. I know I'm a badass, okay? And it took me a long time to get there because I was so beaten down by other people in life. And I never want you guys to feel that way. So if nobody told you today, I believe in you. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.